Welcome to Building People, Companies, and Careers, brought to you by AccruePartners. I'm Amy Pack.
Hey, and I'm Patty Comer. We're your host on this journey through the vibrant business landscape in the Queen City of Charlotte, North Carolina.
This podcast is an extension of our mission statement at AccruePartners, where we've spent over 20 years fostering connections and building relationships.
Whether you're a client, candidate, or business influencer in Charlotte, this podcast is for you.
As co-founders of AccruePartners since 2002, we've evolved into a powerhouse, delivering staffing, search, and project consulting solutions for our clients and candidates.
We're immensely grateful for your support throughout our journey. And now through this podcast, we're excited to share the stories that defined our path and our future.
So let's dive in.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Building People, Companies, and Careers, brought to you by AccruePartners. I'm your host, Patty Comer, and as always, I am with Amy Pack.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here again for yet another episode.
We are the co-founders of AccruePartners, and in this podcast, we are bringing you clients, internal team members, candidates, consultants, and anyone who shakes the business scene here in Charlotte, North Carolina. With us today, we have Joe Pascarella, Project Manager for Transformation and Strategic Initiatives, who is currently working with AccruePartners on a consulting basis through our Project Solutions practice for a publicly traded client who is transforming their business globally. Joe, we are so happy to have you. Thank you so much for coming in today and driving in from Belmont, North Carolina.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Wonderful. So, Joe, at the beginning of each episode, we like to start off with the classic interview question. So, Joe, tell me about yourself.
So, I grew up in a small town in Tennessee near Chattanooga, went to the University of Memphis, studied economics and finance there, and moved to Charlotte just a couple short years after graduating, and I've been here since the summer of 2019. I've worked for various companies. The first company I was with in Charlotte was Raftellus Financial Consultants. So they mostly, at least at the time when I was there, I believe they've quite expanded their consulting practice, but it was mostly in the water utilities space, so water, wastewater, solid waste, stormwater, and they're kind of experts in rate consulting in particular. So how it helps municipalities, be able to plan their capital expenditures and things of that nature, right? So they'll do a project that goes for tens of millions of dollars to improve water infrastructure, say, as an example. So they come back and they say, well, how are we going to sustainably fund this over time and keep it going? Inevitably, that's going to lead to rate increases, and nobody wants to hear that in the public. But they do it in such a way that it's not exorbitant, but also not too little. So there's a pretty big financial modeling component there. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went to work for Deloitte Consulting, where I was in their internal finance group for a couple years. A lot of that revolved around true PMO functions, so helping these project teams, these external consultants, say that were the ones going on site doing the client work. We were their back office support in terms of making sure that their project management functions were taken care of. We also help price and forecast different RFPs. So, but at the end of the day, there was a pretty big emphasis on margin. So, how much they would be billing out for a project and who all was going to be staffed to that project. So there was consideration of, cost rates for the consultants that were going to go be staffed. So kind of this give and take of how much is the SOW actually going to be worth and how much are we paying our people to do the work. So, at the end of the day, it can kind of boil down to that question when it comes to the pricing aspect.
Right.
And then, so a couple years with Deloitte, then I went to ABM, which was kind of my first true exposure to what it means to be in a global transformation group, which is, I would look at the transformation office as like a specialized subset underneath a project management office that typically deals with projects that are changing the business in some way, whether it be systems related, process related, people related. Transformation programs tend to encompass all of that and more. So various initiatives that'll happen in a transformation program. When I was at ABM, there were about 200. Now the client that you've staffed me to, it's about 200 as well. So I think the primary difference at ABM, it was a lot of it was more technical related. Like they were going to be changing out this system, this kind of technical process, whether it be, um, like time cards, going from kind of traditional time cards to more electronic timekeeping software. That was a really big one at the time. And also just strengthening the PMO with better project tracking. So, and during my time at Deloitte, I found out that I was more interested in getting more exposure on the project management side, on the transformation side, and kind of not necessarily drifting further away from corporate FP&A work, because at the current client and at the previous client, that had a lot to do with my day-to-day because of my background in financial modeling and FP&A work. There's always a heavy collaborative component between linking HR leadership with finance leadership and making sure that, budgets are correct, forecasting is correct. So there's always going to be that component, I think, in my career. But
What was the one thing in making that shift into the transformation office that was really the aha moment for you?
so I think at Deloitte, in the last year to 6 months of being there, I was getting more account level responsibility and helping them price out projects. So I think what I came to realize is, man, I really like this resource management portion, making sure the right people are on the right projects, not just from a money standpoint, but also an expertise standpoint. Just kind of getting to know what these people do, what they specialize in, and I became more interested in the people component.
I guess having said that, I know that for me, I'm always interested in people's upbringing and kind of what made you go the direction in the school and university, and then kind of how your career path has gone. Have you had some pretty significant influences, or did it just kind of happen to you? How did you know that this was the path for you?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad is a CPA. And so, there was always kind of this element that I might be going into business, but my mother's side is medicine. So my mom's nurse practitioner. My grandmother was a nurse. One of my sisters is now a nurse. So I always thought it was going to go in one direction or the other. So I get to, like, when I'm a senior in high school, I'm saying, I think I'm going to be pre-med. I think I'm going to go be a doctor. I get to my freshman year of college, taking a chemistry class for science majors. And I say pretty quickly, medical school requires a lot of chemistry. I don't love chemistry. So I think I'm going to pivot. And I just so happened to be taking an intro to macroeconomics class my very first semester as well. And that came very intuitively to me, and it was interesting. And I said, I think I'll pick this. It's easier for me to understand. It speaks more to the way that I think. And economics is a very, very broad subject. You can go from much more right brain kind of qualitative analysis, like more social science, how do people work, predicting behavior on a small level and a large level. Like game theory is kind of an interesting breaking point between this side and then the very technical side of economics. Your econometrics, your financial economics, where they're trying to anticipate market trends to increase, potential gains, whatever it may be. So I just found economics was almost kind of the meeting point between social science and hard science.
Awesome. Yeah,
So.
the functional versus the technical of what your career seems to be evolving
Yeah.
to. It's
So
super interesting.
I kind of stumbled into it. And I picked up a minor in finance just for application's sake, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to understand more about how money actually moves in a business. Because I said, well, I'm going to have some kind of business-related expertise to land an entry-level role that I think is, good to have.
Awesome. So when you get on these projects now, I mean, you've probably done 20, 30 different projects at this stage in your career. How many years post-college are you?
I graduated in May of 17
Okay.
from undergrad. Do not have a master's degree yet. People ask me more and more often now, the further I get in my career, and I just, I'm still very focused on just performing in my career. And I think when the moment comes and I say, yep, it makes sense to do it now, I absolutely will.
Yeah. So you've been on a lot of projects now. Are there any particulars that you know going in with your Deloitte training, which is the best in class, best in the world, and now in corporate America per se, working directly for the client?
Right.
Are there pizzas that this project's going to go well, this project's going to fail? Like, what are some of those experience gates that you have now that you could share with people who are thinking about a career in this field, or hey, I've seen this go well, this not go well. What are some things that you think about there?
Yeah. So typically in the last two roles that I've had, this one and then at ABM, a lot of it, like when I came into the group, was, hey, we need to centralize things. We need to make sense of all this stuff that we have going on. We need to get it underneath us, and we need to have a way to report on it, track it, stuff of that nature. So typically, if you're going to get involved in a transformation office, it's going to be different week to week, even day to day sometimes, right? I mean, there are always going to be constraints with projects. Before I guess we dive in, like, you need to understand that, like, yes, every project's going to have a timeline and goals and deliverables, milestones, whatever word you want to use there. But the human element is always going to sometimes derail the project in different things. Maybe there's an issue on the technical side that was not foreseen. It's going to back it up 2 weeks, right? They got to figure it out. Or if it's more process related, it could be, oh, well, we didn't consider this aspect that is now starting to show its head, and we should have, accounted for that, but we didn't. So timelines often, almost always, get shifted a little bit because of how the transformations themselves evolve over time. So I'm not sure if that answered your question great, but typically I've come into places where, hey, we don't have a lot of centralized information. We don't have a lot of insight into how this is all truly going to play out, but we have our plans. We have our initiatives identified already, right? Like in the previous, or actually in the current role, they had a consulting firm that had been there for about 6 months. And they had done a lot of the legwork of, setting up, hey, these are going to be the initiatives where you're going to hit your targets, like for dollars. You're going to hit them in a certain timeline, and you're going to have these various things accomplished at given points. So I don't know. I think you can get very complicated talking about this stuff, but at the end of the day, it can be boiled down quite simply just to dollars and timelines.
Yeah. So I know we get called in a lot after some of the very large consulting firms give these plans you just talked about. They know exactly what's going to happen, when, where, but then they go, here's some projects you need to work on. Is that what you found in both of the organizations that you've worked with, that some of the larger consulting firms set the strategic, here's where we're headed, and then the team comes behind to figure out what that's all about?
Yeah, I think, those consulting teams, right? Your Deloitte's, your McKinsey's, your Bain's, the KPMG, EY, like they will come in for a certain time period, 6 months, a year, really help establish the groundwork for a transformation program for a client. And then they say, okay, we're handing the bike that we built over to you. Now it's your turn to take it and ride with, get on it and ride it.
Make it go.
But of course, in those first few months of them leaving and like transitioning in, like what I did, I came in as the PM and I only had about a week and a half while they were still on site with us full time. And so there was just so much that I was like, what is this? What is that? What do I need to do here? And they were making sure I was set up for success. And so there's like a lot of that in the beginning, is making sure, hey, do I understand all this correctly? And do we have it tied out in such a way that, hey, corporate FP&A has this mindset with these projects? Does that all still make sense? And I think I'm a little over 3 months into the role, if I'm not mistaken, maybe closer to 4. But there are still a lot of, hey, we're still having to adjust expectations based on how 2024 is going to play out. So there have already been quite a few initiatives be revised in terms of timeline, in terms of dollars. some stakeholders in the organization have said, hey, I know we committed to this with the consulting group 6 months ago, but we just can't afford to do that now. It just doesn't make sense for us to do it now. But they still have this target that they have to meet in terms of dollars or financial metrics that FP&A and corporate finance sets out for them. And they say, well, you still have to hit your savings targets or your investments targets. You still have to hire these roles as investments. You still have to create efficiencies in different parts of the business, right? You still have these targets that you committed to and you have to do them. It's just how we're changing the roadmap to get you there. That's been a lot of it lately, is you still committed to these financial metrics, these dollars. So you're saying you're pulling out of the way that you're going to get there in certain initiatives. Well, we got to figure out new initiatives to make up for that and get you there. Yeah. Bridge that gap. They call it a go-get. You know, okay, we have this pot of money now, but you got to actually go out and execute and get it done.
Yeah. It's kind of refreshing to hear because we've used, we're a much smaller business than where you're working for us at, which is a publicly traded company. We've had consultants come in to help us with our roadmap. And then, you build that roadmap late 2023 for your initiatives in 2024. And then the markets are blah, 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 and you have to shift. And I don't think the big strategy buckets change, but kind of the bullet
Correct.
points underneath what you might be willing to commit to or what you're able to accomplish really shift. And it's nice to hear
that it's not really linear.
Correct.
Yeah, because we do struggle.
Yeah. So curious, there's, obviously we talked to lots of candidates throughout the organization. A lot of people want to have a role, much like what you have in transformation and strategy. What would be a suggestion or what would be some advice you would give someone of how to make that pivot in order to do what you've been able to accomplish in just such short order?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, like if you want to get into project management, corporate strategy, transformation, I would say it's important to understand macroeconomics, generally speaking, like from an academic sense of what are a lot of the major markets that are out there that make the country run, that make the world run, right? Like how does banking work? Why are some of the largest companies as successful as they are? Kind of research what has made industry leaders really stand out. So I'd say having a degree of intellectual curiosity about this aspect of business is important, like just trying to be a student of the game, so to speak. I think that'll help you target exactly what type of industry you want to specialize as a project manager or, strategy type, right? To really kind of say, okay, I know more about this type of industry than others, and I'm going to tailor my focus because I'm not an engineer, right? Engineering firms hire a lot of project managers, but the type of project management they do is engineering related, right? Mine is more people and culture related, more finance related. And so there are so many different types of strategic initiatives, different focuses based on the companies and firms. So I think you also need to narrow down what kind of clients am I actually going to try to work for.
Yeah, I do think his profile of corporate finance experience turned project management, HR transformation, and strategy is super unique. Like when we were looking for the consultant for this project, it was very difficult to find. You can find finance strategy people. You can find HR strategy people. The mirror of those two, I think, was difficult for us to identify you as an option for the client. So I think that is also with so much pressure on companies around HR transformation and being self-service, being impactful, measurable, those types of things. From a finance perspective, you really just offer a skill set of the future. Selfishly, I really do a lot of the tech stack work at Accrue. How much ChatGPT and AI is currently involved in the work that you're doing? Are you using it on the daily to help you with communication? Are you researching that on a broader scope for your project? What are some of your points there that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I find AI fascinating. I think it's something that, we're going to have to accept as part of reality as society continues to advance and technology continues to advance. Me personally, I don't use natural language processing tools to write my like communications. I don't know if you've heard of like the Clifton Strengths,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
done by Gallup. So the client is very big on that. My direct report's right hand person. He's a huge advocate for it. So he was like, "Hey Joe, I want you to take this." So I took it. Communication was number 3 in my top 5, and that's the ability to kind of take what's up here and be able to write it out or be able to tell a story with it. And so I think that ChatGPT, being a natural language processing tool, it still uses a lot of input output and doesn't necessarily have the kind of cobweb, spider web brain that humans have, being able to pull in related concepts in such a way. So I don't necessarily use it to help me write or help me communicate. I have used it for quick facts, like, trying to, I mean, there are a lot of examples, I guess, but not using it for it to do my job, but for me to just satisfy some intellectual curiosity or making sure what I'm saying is real or true. So whether it be a historical fact or whatever other, public information that can readily
Yeah.
come up.
Yeah. I think it's going to just replace the commonality of the human. Anything that's common and boring, the natural human language, it's just going to replace that. But the cobwebs and the really difficult thinking and the curiosity, that piece is not going to be. Maybe over time it'll learn to be smarter, but I don't know. I just find it all fascinating. We use it. Most of it's on the communication area
yeah.
or having to reschool a thought and say it in a different way or
Yeah.
take a plan that you're working on and having some prescriptive advice that you might have not thought about, but then research what it's providing. But the open, AI environment is just scary. So trying to limit what you put in there
Yeah.
at this point till we're in private environment. So, all right. Well, do you want to move to the rapid fire?
Yeah, that sounds great. Are you ready? All right. So tell us, what is your favorite lunch or dinner spot in Charlotte or Belmont for that matter?
Yeah, so I'll go. You have to remember my Charlotte barometer is 2019 to 2021. So I really enjoyed because my wife and I, we she wasn't my wife at the time, but she is now. We lived in South End, and we tried all the different spots around there. I would say Superica was probably our favorite spot in South End. Just great food. We like that kind of stuff.
That's if you can find a place to park.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
First park, then eat.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and I guess that's what was nice. We could just walk from our apartment.
There you go,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, now it's us trying to go to South End. It's like, well, we might just want to Uber instead because parking is going to be hard to find. But in Belmont, man, there's a lot of good stuff. I would say the String Bean. It's like a lot of farm to table, so they kind of source a lot of their ingredients regionally, like their, not just the meats and stuff like that, but even down to some of the basic ingredients as well. So
The string beans.
the String Bean, yeah, and they change their menu seasonally as well. Typically, like they have some mainstays and all that, but they really rotate the menu based on seasonal vegetables and stuff like that. So,
I mean, I do think you fit the prescriptive young professional Charlottean. Move into Charlotte, you come to South End, which is the hottest, hippest, well-vibed place. And,
Yep.
You meet your wife there. So you met her while you were in South End?
no, we actually knew each other in Tennessee.
Okay, so you brought her here, you picked
Yeah.
the hippest place, and then you got engaged with COVID's going on and all that good stuff. What was the draw to Belmont? Kind of why Belmont? What was some of y'all's decision-making about that part of our community?
Yeah, so we were always looking west to kind of cut out some drive time when we go back to Tennessee to see our families. My parents and her parents live only about 45 minutes apart. So same, our high schools played sports against each other, if that's any context of how regionally close we are. So we were always looking toward Gaston County area just to cut out a lot of that Charlotte navigation to get to and from. And Beaumont, is the closest to Charlotte in terms of how the roads are currently built. So that kind of narrowed it down for us to get to Belmont, and also that kind of small town feel. It's obviously becoming more suburban feel, not so much small town feel. We were talking right before the
Mhm.
podcast of how much it's building up now. But, just kind of that still sort of out of the way of the hustle and bustle for the most part. We enjoyed that environment.
Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about. I always like to hear about what's your best boss and worst boss. Kind of Amy and I always joke about starting AccruePartners because we had a horrible boss. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about like who's been your best boss that you've ever had, and kind of maybe on the opposite of that.
Yeah, I'd say the best boss is the current one at the client that you've staffed me with. Thank you, by the way,
You're
for
welcome.
giving me the opportunity
Thank
to do
you
it.
for doing a great job.
Thank you. But I just feel like our working styles are very compatible. I will say this to any younger people fresh out of school. I think a very important thing is to build rapport with your manager very quickly. Demonstrate competence, demonstrate dependability, demonstrate that you can be counted on to deliver things when they need to be done. And I think when you kind of have that unspoken expectation now, where there is this mutual, hey, you can trust me to get this done, I think it's more apparent in like big consulting firms where it's like if you're an associate consultant or a staff level consultant, you kind of notice that the senior consultants and junior managers have like this level of sign off where they have some autonomy to go and do things without much review. And it kind of just goes up and gets presented and all that stuff. Not a ton of review, but if you're entry level or staff level, you're kind of competing to get that level of trust and sign off from your management. And so I would say a lot of the early parts of your career are trying to demonstrate that to whoever the management that comes in and out in a given year. I mean, you have to demonstrate your competence and your dependability. And so I think coming into a role like this with the prior experience, I think it was already like, okay, we can trust him to do the job. And so I think that hard part was kind of done in part thanks to you helping place me and vouching for me and saying, no, he can do all this stuff for you and do it well. So I think that was already kind of a foregone conclusion when I showed up. And so given that, there is just a lot of trust of, hey, Joe, we know that these things are coming up this week. We know that you can get it done. And I think having this back and forth of not constantly having expectations managed between each other, it's more fluid. It's more, hey, we know high level what we have to accomplish this week, and things are going to come up, right? Things are going to pop up, and you just have to go with the flow and adjust, and week to week still make
Yeah,
it
I mean, I
happen and
love
get it
how
done.
you took the accountability to say, build a rapport and let them know that they can trust me. What is it that you do that make people know that you can trust them? I mean, you've been on this on consulting, gig for 3 months, and you're saying she's the best boss you've ever had, and you built trust with her out of the gate. What is it that you do? I mean, I can sense it in your style. You just carry yourself with a lot of confidence and trust and authentic way that you talk. But what might be some tips for other professionals starting a new job? Because with the market like it is today, either they're forced in the market because of layoffs and whatnot, or if they want to make a change, they're nervous to go to the next place because
Mhm.
what if they get in trouble financially and
Right.
then they lay me off? What is something you've done to like out of the gate make them know I can count on this guy?
Yeah, so I think the first and foremost is don't be someone you're not. Just be comfortable in your own skin, and I think just developing that part of yourself like outside of any professional context, like being introspective enough and knowing who you are at your core and being comfortable with yourself and your own skin is a big deal. Learning to be honest with yourself. And I think it helps you discover your strengths and weaknesses earlier rather than later. So I'd say that's kind of first and foremost is don't try to wear a mask or a veil or whatever it might be to try to signal you're something that you're not. I think there is an element of, hey, I do want to signal that I'm very competent. I do want to signal that I'm hardworking and I will be here when you need me to be here in person. You can trust me to get the things done remotely. when that calls for it. And so I'm not sure if
I mean,
I've
it's a
really
big deal,
answered
the
the
trust and what you
yeah.
talked about. You'll be in the office when you need me. You'll be remote. I mean, it is still a pretty, I don't know what the words
It's
I'm
very
trying.
tenuous
Yeah, the
between.
Yeah.
candidates all want to
Mhm.
still, or employees want to all be at home. The boss and the company wants them back, and there's just this, in my mind, just unrealistic expectations by
Mhm.
the employee and the candidates. Like, I don't want to consider that job at XYZ company if it's not remote. I'm like, well, I mean,
Yeah.
prior to a short window of 3 years of the pandemic, I mean, we all worked together
Yep.
and whatnot. So, I mean, I appreciate you validating that for your boss because it's hard to get
Yeah.
confirmation that the person will be there when you need them.
Well, and that
Mhm.
is the trust that
Yep.
you've done things that you probably don't realize or don't recall or remember or said things that have really given her that confirmation that you have it, and you've probably gone far above the expectation to give that further validation,
Yeah. On
which
the
is
other
great.
side, who's the worst boss? Can't name their name, but
No.
anything in particular, never to do.
I mean, I think it, was in those earlier roles, and I think a lot of it may have been justified at the time, right? Because I was inexperienced, I didn't know what I was doing, I was still figuring things out. And I will just say, like, expect if you're coming out of school or only a couple years out of school, you are going to get micromanaged. You are going to get treated like you're new to business and you don't know anything. You only just know what the college textbooks told you or any internships you had. Like, congratulations, pat on the back. But hey, you're in the real world now. So, you got to keep up and figure it out. So you are going to have bosses with that attitude early in your career. They
Yeah.
are going to want to micromanage you, and they are going to almost force you into a position of, no, I am competent enough to do it. I can learn fast enough to do it. I can adapt quickly enough to prove to you that I can do it. And I think early in my career, having um, one or two of those early, in that almost kind of saying, you can't do it right. You can't do it right, or you can't do it the way that I want it. And I think that kind of I honestly like that kind of talk toward me, like, oh, you'll never be a good putter in golf, right? You'll never be a good putter, right? Just using a common day example. It's like, now, you know what? Because you said that, because you doubted my ability, I'm going to practice putting, right? Just as a silly
That's
example,
great.
right?
Yeah.
No, so it's like when somebody says you can't do it, you say, watch me, I'll do it,
Yeah.
put
The
my mind to
competitive
it.
spirit, I
Mhm.
think, is probably in a lot of us as to
Yeah.
you don't think we'll be the largest staffing firm, or yes, we will be.
Yeah.
Or, your career won't go this way. Yes, it will. So
Yeah.
I think it's really great to see that competitive spirit.
Yeah. I got to prove them wrong,
Yeah.
and it's not all externally motivated either, right? I also want to prove to myself that I can do it. At the end of the day, you're the one that lives your inner life and you're the one that lives your life.
Hmm.
So it's, if you have to do it for yourself as much as anything else, right? Like, yeah, of course you want to demonstrate to your boss and to your peers that you can do it and that you can prove them wrong. But you also need to do it for yourself, most importantly, and just have that sense of self gratification for accomplishment.
Hmm.
Mhm.
That is so true. So tell us, we are always big on sayings. Like, we have little sayings everyone knows us for. And as you kind of get known at work or at home,
Mhm.
what are some sayings that you like to kind of use in your daily?
I think I'm a big person because I don't know, I what do they call it? Ideation was my number one on the Clifton Strengths
Okay.
test. So that has a lot to do with the working through the spider web in the brain, finding interconnected principles and concepts, and being able to articulate it. So I think I can sometimes find myself trapped in my head a little bit, trying to say the perfect thing that I'm trying to say and make sure I'm capturing all the elements appropriately. So I think you will catch me saying a lot, like when I'm really trying to think of something more complicated to say. I don't know, as far
That's
as
your brain cleaning out the stations
yeah.
of that top Clifton strength. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the one that may irritate bystanders. I don't know. But as far as having like a true go-to saying, I'm not sure if I have one of those. Like the dad type phrases.
You're working on it. You got
Yeah.
2 dogs and a wife. There'll be next things for you to come up with.
Surely in time I'll get there to where I have those sayings. But quite frankly, I don't know if I could identify one.
Well,
right
hey, I
away.
love that you just said you don't have one, and it's and that's because you're really smart and you're thinking through everything.
I don't know about that. But
I didn't hear a lot of ums in there, so that, if anything,
No,
that was good.
I didn't
Yeah,
hear any.
yeah.
So if that's a
Thanks.
goal you've been working on, you've definitely nailed it. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're just so interesting. I love the finance to HR to project management. I mean, you really do kind of storytell the AccruePartners project consulting business and how the clients are being led by large consulting firms but still have to implement the work. I mean, it's a really strong story for what we wanted to tell the market and what's happening in our clients and in your career of how you've already pivoted 7 years post college. I mean, I think so that's pretty interesting already. I mean, they say at your age you're going to have 20 different jobs. I mean, think about the 3 that you've just described, how they've led up and pivoted you to where you are today. It's just really fascinating to me.
yeah.
You've done a lot more than most at your career journey.
Yes.
So,
Well,
congrats to you for that.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Like I said, it's almost like I fell into it, kind of stumbled into it. It was really just, I think this is what I want to study in school. See where it takes me. It makes sense to me, and
But when you found it, you took the bull by the horns.
right, yeah,
And so-
and I just felt like, no, I think this is what I'm meant to be doing at the end of the day. It came to me. I see every reason to take it and go with it and give it my best. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we thank you for sharing your story and building people, companies, and your podcast in our new studio, which we absolutely love. It feels really comfortable. Enjoy being here with you
yeah,
today.
this is really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
I like
is.
this.
Everybody's Studios over in
Yeah,
Elizabeth.
it's like you got to drive to Midtown, sort of.
Yeah, Midtown South.
Yeah.
We're getting all these little new
Pockets.
neighborhood names that
Yeah.
we can't even
it's
keep
nice.
up with.
There's a little park right there too. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate the time.
thank you so much.
Yes,
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.